I no longer remember the taste of air. My lungs are filled with filtered sand. My blood replaced with data. I was born as flesh, but the Forge stripped that weakness from me long ago. They called it ascension. I called it subtraction. The Omnissiah does not ask for faith. He asks for surrender. And I gave it, my voice, my skin, my memory, all traded for precision, efficiency, obedience. We are the spear tip of Mars' will, the ghost army that marches before the Mechanicus even speaks. Skitarii, flesh bound to machine, mind bound to code, purpose bound to war. When we deploy, worlds end not in flame, but in silence. No song of bolters, no roar of engines, only the static hum of thought being erased. I used to believe that meant victory. Now I know it means something far worse. It means the war has gone on so long, even the machine spirits have grown tired. It means we are fighting ghosts of ourselves. It means I am dying, and I can't even remember what that word feels like. Because when you are made of machine, death isn't an ending, it's an update. If you are hearing this through the Vox ether, archive it, like, share, transmit. Do not pray for me. The Omnissiah does not listen, but memory still does. And maybe one day, when Mars has forgotten what it means to bleed, you'll remember me. One Skitarii, one soldier, one error in the code. They did not call it pain, not in the Forge. Pain was a signal, nothing more. A chemical alert meant to be silenced or replaced. They called it refinement. I remember the sound more than the sensation, the shriek of bone saws, the hiss of promethium cauterizers, the static buzz of the catechisms recited by tech priests in place of anesthetic. The echo of the data hymns bled into everything. Each incision followed a liturgy, every removed organ a sacrament. My designation was 73 Omicron Aurex. I had a name once before they flayed it from me like outdated flesh. A simple name spoken in low hive dialect used by my mother, perhaps. I can't recall it. The memory is there, buried in corrupted sectors of thought space, shrouded in code fragments that no longer compile properly. That is the cost of obedience. Identity is imprecise. Precision is truth. I was born on Stygia 6. Deep beneath the orbital Forge cities where daylight had long been replaced by the glare of plasma furnaces. There was no sunrise in my world, only the pulse of warning strobes and the rhythm of the assembly chant. We were taught that the Emperor's light was distant, abstract, a concept for planets with sky. Down here we had the Omnissiah, and he spoke through instruction, through order, through the mechanized roar of productivity. He loved us in patterns, he judged us through output. The day I was chosen was the last day I bled. They came in red robes, faceless beneath bronze masks, their voices flat through vox grills, their servo skulls trailing behind like obedient insects. They read from a data slate that pulsed with Martian script and asked if I was willing. Willing to rise, willing to serve, willing to be perfected. I said yes. I remember the others too, some stronger than me, some smarter, some already part mechanical, chosen from different manufactoria. We were lined up, stripped bare and inspected like machine parts awaiting assembly. One boy refused to kneel. The electro-priest beside him whispered a binary prayer and turned him to static. No scream, just absence. I didn't look away. I wanted them to see my resolve. I didn't know then that resolve would be the first thing they'd remove. They started with the eyes. Organic vision is inefficient, prone to distraction, prone to empathy. They replaced them with ocular implants, one wide spectrum, the other heat-tuned for target discrimination. The loss of depth perception was only temporary. My optic nerves were cauterized and rethreaded with logic spine filaments. I watched my own blood hiss on the table before the smell left me. Next came the limbs. Muscle was replaced with fiber coils and servo tendons. Bones reinforced with adamantine struts. I remember the sound of my femur being split open, The echo of metal sliding into marrow, the smell of melting cartilage. And through it all, the chant continued. Flesh is fallible. Upgrade. Purge. Serve. They removed my tongue last. Communication would no longer require sound. I was given a vox chip instead, slotted into my throat like a blessed relic. I could speak again, technically, but my words would no longer be my own. They belonged to the command node, to the forge, to Mars. When I awoke from the final cycle, I was Skitarii, not a soldier, not a man, an extension. I stood beside hundreds like me, rows of enhanced bodies identical in posture, faceless behind uniform helms. My vision flickered with target data. My spine hummed with incoming commands. The world no longer had noise, only inputs and outputs. I remember the silence not as absence but as clarity. The Forge Lord approached then, Magos Verdrick Sin, a priest so ancient his robes seemed fused to his exoframe. He moved like a memory. His voice crackled directly into our heads, bypassing ears. He said we were perfect. He said we were clean. He said we were finally worthy of service. And then he assigned us to war. No celebration, no rites of passage. We were boxed into stasis coffins and stacked like ammunition, shipped across the void toward a front we'd never seen, fighting for a cause we'd never been allowed to question. My first memory of the battlefield was the scent of ozone and metal dust. I did not feel fear. The emotion drive had been turned down for combat efficacy. But I did feel something else. Anticipation, perhaps. Not for battle, for confirmation. To prove that all the subtraction had made me closer to truth. We moved as one, dropped into no-atmosphere craters and irradiated ruins. Orders flowed through the neural relay and our bodies obeyed before we had time to consider. Targets appeared in glowing outlines. We destroyed them. Enemy signatures faded. We moved on. There was no victory, only successful completion of designated tasks. I remember one moment, barely. A servitor collapsed beside me, its frame twisted by residual warp energy, still flickering. I turned my head, not because I was told to, because I wanted to. And in that brief deviation from command, I saw its face. Human, still partly human. Mouth open, eyes frozen, tears not yet dried. I don't know why it shook me, but it did. And the moment that recognition formed, a red warning flashed across my vision. Error, independent emotive trace detected. I reset my systems. Obedience resumed. But I still remember that face. The Forge said I shouldn't, but I do. And if I still remember, does that mean I never fully became what they wanted? Or does it mean I failed to forget? The deployment cycle began with no ceremony. A pulse across the thought web, a data ping in our cognition units, and we moved. Precision was our ritual. We were not loaded like soldiers, we were inserted like variables. ELSD 9 was listed as a red designation. Compromised biosphere, residual warp trace, no surviving human population. The kind of world that should have been scoured and archived. Instead, the Adeptus Mechanicus wanted it back. The atmospheric re-entry sequence hissed like breath being forced through a rusted pipe. I watched through the glass of my helmet as the planet rose beneath us. A diseased marble wrapped in red lightning, its upper cloud bands shimmering with static anomalies. There was no sun visible, only dim ambient glow diffused by storm cover. The forge behind us, the war in front. The line between became irrelevant. We hit soil, not as men, not as drop troopers, but as tools falling into place. Our boots crushed centuries of ash into fine powder. The wind carried no air, only residue, traces of promethium, long-decayed flesh, powdered ferrocrete. I tasted none of it. My filtration systems translated the storm into binary scent keys. Unstable, unclean, unwelcome. There were ruins, Structures built by human hands now melted into impossible shapes. Walls spiraled into the sky and vanished. Roads turned at wrong angles. Whole spires were embedded upside down in the ground like monuments laid by mad gods. This was not the doing of the Imperium nor its enemies. This was something deeper, something forgotten. We advanced through it. No one spoke. No one needed to. Our orders flowed in timed pulses: advance, clear, analyze, purge. The enemy had no shape. It was ambient. Sometimes it was movement at the corner of vision. Sometimes it was corrupted servo skulls, their wings snapping like teeth as they screamed dead dialects. Sometimes it was nothing at all, just silence that pressed against our helmets until our sanity monitors flickered yellow. But we moved forward, always forward. We encountered resistance on the 6th day cycle, not hostile, just present. A field of bodies, Mechanicus robes, servitor rigs, half-completed data looms, all lying as if carefully placed in formation. Their cogitators still hummed, even though their spines were rotted. One turned its head as we passed. It blinked, then it powered down. No threats detected, no action taken. We logged the anomaly and moved on. By the 12th cycle, our unit count had dropped. Not from combat, from absence. Skitarii, who had marched beside me, no longer appeared in the mesh. Their identifiers pinged once, then vanished. No alarms, no alerts. We would turn and they would be gone, as if their existence had been cut out of the code. Magos Trask 11 deployed remote observer drones to track deviations. One returned. Its pict feed showed a Skitarii vanguard kneeling before a collapsed Vox tower, helmet removed, face untouched. His mouth moved, no sound emerged. Then he stood, walked into the static storm. The drone followed and vanished. Magos Trask said nothing. He simply updated the parameters. Deviant behavior logged. Authorization to terminate if replicated. We obeyed, because that's what we were made to do. But I began to feel irregularities, not errors, not full system faults, just hesitation. During a breach into a collapsed data vault, my weapon arm locked mid-motion. I had a target, clear and visible, a writhing thing half-built from skulls and cables, breathing through a Vox grill of melted bone. It crawled toward me unarmed. I should have fired, but my optic lens lingered. Its face was wrong, familiar. There was no logic to it. It couldn't be. But something in its expression, some buried echo of memory, froze my limbs. I stared. It stared back. Then it laughed. No voice, just feedback. And then it collapsed. Dust. I ran a full diagnostic. No glitch, no deviation logged. Only a whisper in my thought web, so faint I wondered if I imagined it. We were always here. I reported nothing, because I knew what would happen: deviation, purge. Memory was a malfunction, emotion was treason, even wonder was dangerous. So I stayed silent, but I started counting my footsteps. I started watching for signs of deviation in others. I started watching myself. One cycle later, we found the scar. It stretched across the plains like a wound that had never healed. A trench dug not by tools, but by pressure. Something massive had moved through here, dragging reality behind it like a weight. At the center of the scar, a pillar of glass. Perfectly smooth, 10 meters high. No inscriptions, no shadow. One Skitarii approached. Without orders, she reached out her hand, touched the glass, and vanished. Not burned, not destroyed, just gone. Magos Trask issued a purge directive. I executed it. I had to. Her designation flickered red. Her last known coordinates became a null zone. But even as her data string was deleted from the record, I could still see her. Not physically, in memory. She had smiled once, long ago, during the installation of her respiratory node. I remembered, and that meant something was wrong. Not with her, with me. The forge had stripped me clean, but something remained, something impossible, and I began to wonder. What happens when a machine remembers it was a man? They told us that memory was noise, a symptom of corrupted signal paths. Delete, refine, repeat, said the Magi who built us, their voices clicking through Vox distortion. To remember is to err. But something was different now. Every time I recalibrated my targeting auger, there was a hesitation, an echo between thought and action like static that refused to clear. At first I ignored it. Skitarii do not hesitate. But soon that echo began to speak. It began with a smell, not data scent, not chemical. A smell that wasn't in the combat library at all, smoke, wet ash, something burning in the rain. My olfactory array couldn't name it, but I could. Fire from home, a forge not of Mars but of humanity, one with wood, with heat that stung, not sterilized plasma. The realization hit me like recoil. For a moment I wasn't 73 Omicron Oryx. I was someone else. A boy, maybe, watching a workshop burn, watching my father shout over the storm. Then, as fast as it came, the image folded back into static. I told myself it was a glitch. I ran a hard reset. No errors detected, but the next time I fired my galvanic rifle, the recoil stung in a way it never had before. Pain, real pain, flashed through nerve circuits that shouldn't have existed. I froze for a fraction of a second. My systems compensated, flagged a delay, self-corrected. My handler's voice hissed across the channel, a burst of binaric rebuke. Maintain sequence. Deviation logged that night cycle I couldn't power down. The others entered low-activity states, their optics dimming one by one, the faint hymn of network communion fading into silence. I should have joined them. Instead, I watched the horizon, if you could call it that. LSD-9 had no sky, just layers of shifting fog lit by the memory of lightning. Shapes moved within it, architecture or beasts I couldn't tell anymore. The longer I looked, the more the patterns changed. It reminded me of breathing. And then I did breathe. A deep, shaking breath, unscheduled, uncommanded. Air hissed through my rebreather valves, unnecessary and heavy. I felt it scrape the back of my throat. Felt the taste of metal, of old oxygen, of something alive. For one impossible instant, I could feel my heart beating. It terrified me. I didn't report the malfunction. I couldn't. Trask would have dissected me on the spot, reclaimed my augmetics, and reduced my memory core to feedstock. So I pretended. I walked the line. I obeyed the pulses. I killed when commanded. I reloaded when ordered. And yet, behind every motion, I could sense a shadow, me, watching myself perform, measuring the distance between machine and ghost. By the fourth campaign week, others began to falter. Skitarii across the regiment displayed micro-delays in reaction time, bursts of individuality, hesitation in target execution. Some began murmuring subvocally, not in binaric but in language, human words, fragments. Wait, please, I remember. The Magos ordered full system purges. He called it optimization. We watched as they lined up the affected one by one and plugged their spinal ports into a purification array. The process was efficient. Each head tilted back, each optic dimmed. The humming grew. Then silence. Their data cores were wiped clean, their husks reclassified as servitors. I stood in line next, awaiting my turn. My optic lenses showed the exact second when the one before me ceased to exist. I was next. And then the alarm started. Warp signal, distortion breach, enemy signatures on multiple vectors. The Magos screamed for deployment, his mechadendrites flailing like frenzied serpents. I was released before my turn came. We ran, not in panic, in precision. Formation perfect, targets acquired. But the enemy wasn't something the Forge had prepared us for. It wasn't physical. It was a sound, a whisper at the edge of signal bandwidth. Not binary, not human, something between. Every time it pulsed, the static inside me grew. Every time it spoke, I understood more. Not in words, but in recognition. It didn't want to destroy us. It wanted us to remember. The battlefield bent around that sound. I saw Skitarii stop mid-run, rifles lowering, optics flickering. One tore off his helmet. Another began laughing through his Vox grill until his lungs failed. Trask tried to overtake the signal, his voice rising in machine cant, screaming invocations of the Omnissiah. But even his tone fractured. The whisper bled through him louder now, rising to a pitch that made even data streams ache. Then it said my name. Not 73 Omicron Oryx, my real name. The one I'd forgotten. I dropped to my knees. Everything went dark, but I wasn't offline. I was awake, more awake than I had ever been. My memories unraveled in reverse, faces, smells, voices, all cascading through circuits never meant to hold them. My mother's hands, my father's laugh, the feeling of sunlight through dusted air. The warmth of an engine burning clean. I began to cry. Not with tears, those ducts were long gone, but with sound. A low broken gasp that escaped my Vox unit like static filtered through grief. The others didn't notice, they were fighting ghosts now. I rose, my rifle dangled, forgotten. My system screamed for compliance. Red alerts filled my vision. Error, unit unsynchronized. Error, neural code deviation. And still the whisper called. It wasn't the warp. It wasn't chaos. It was memory, the raw, unfiltered humanity we were meant to forget. Then I understood. The Forge hadn't purified us. It had amputated us. Every Skitarii on this planet wasn't a soldier of Mars. We were orphans. Each augmentation, each deletion, each replacement. None of it was salvation. It was abandonment disguised as purpose. I wanted to scream, but instead I spoke. I remember. It wasn't a prayer. It wasn't rebellion. It was a statement, a fact. The truest thing I'd ever said, and the moment I said it, the world answered back. The storm over Illis D9 shifted. The clouds folded into themselves, revealing a thin vertical column of white light tearing through the horizon. Not warp light, not solar. Something else. I looked up, knowing the Magos would see it too. And for the first time, his voice faltered. He whispered, "It's listening." We thought it was the end. The storm had parted, the white column piercing the skies above Illis D9 like the blade of a god, humming in a pitch too pure to belong to the living. The Magos called it the song of the machine spirit, but there was fear in his tone, a kind of reverence that had no doctrine behind it. I stood among the others, our armor hissing with heat, ash clinging to every groove while that impossible note vibrated through the air. At first it was just light, soft pale, harmless. Then the air began to change, not temperature, density. Every breath pressed harder, every motion resisted, as if gravity itself was adjusting to some hidden rhythm. The column didn't touch the ground. It hovered inches above the scar, burning a circle of nothing into reality. It wasn't consuming. It was removing. Matter ceased to exist where the beam reached, like it was undoing history atom by atom. Trask ordered data capture. The Magos deployed his servo skulls, chanting as they flew into the glow, their wings disintegrating mid-flight, their screams converted into binary prayers before fading into static. He claimed it was communion. I knew better. Whatever that light was, it wasn't listening. It was speaking, and it spoke in a language I almost understood. It wasn't binary, it wasn't Gothic, it was older, deeper, a language of vibration and memory. It sang directly through the circuitry of our bodies, bypassing logic, bypassing reason. My augmetic implants began to hum in harmony, resonating with it. The mechanical part of me wanted to respond, to join the frequency. The human part, whatever remained, wanted to run. One of us stepped forward, Unit 89 Tau, a Ranger Alpha. Her armor was cracked, her optics dim. She raised her galvanic rifle toward the light as if drawn by instinct. The Magos barked through the vox net for her to halt, but she didn't. She lowered her weapon, removed her helm, and whispered a sound I couldn't recognize. Not Benaric, not human. She walked into the light. She didn't burn, she didn't vanish, she reassembled. Her form broke apart into threads of gold data light, each filament unraveling into code, until only her shadow remained, flickering faintly before it too dissolved. The song changed pitch, louder, faster, like it had noticed us. And then the Magos started laughing, not the sound of triumph. Madness. His mechadendrites flailed as he tore open his own chest plating, exposing a tangled nest of cables and red glow. "It's him," he said. "The Omnissiah calls. You will listen. You will sing." His voice broke into binary shrieks, his body shaking as his connection ports began to spark. "He speaks through the storm. Do you not see? The machine god is awakening." He spread his arms and turned to us. "Walk into it." No one moved. He screamed louder, his voice now an unholy harmony of mechanical feedback and human tone. "Walk into it!" When we didn't obey, he forced the command line through the noosphere. My neural link flared with command codes. Pain, real pain, struck through every circuit as my body tried to obey. My legs took a step forward against my will. Another. The white light grew brighter, closer. My armor's warning systems howled, trying to shut down sensory input. My optics flooded white. Then, silence. I disconnected. I tore my uplink from the command feed, ripping out the cable that tied me to the Magos. I felt the data line break like a nerve snapping. He turned on me, his lenses blazing red. "Error," he hissed. "Deviant protocol detected." He raised his weaponized mechadendrite. I fired first. A single galvanic round tore through the air and struck his chest. He didn't fall. He smiled. He looked at me the way a father might look at a disobedient child who finally learned to speak. "Good," he said. "You remembered." Then he fell backward into the light. The moment his body touched it, the beam exploded outward. Not in violence, in sound. A roar of pure, perfect harmony cascaded through the valley. Every data feed went white. Every machine screamed. The song of the machine spirit had become a storm. The ground fractured, rippling like water under pressure. Around me, Skitarii dropped their weapons, clutching at their heads as their logic cores overloaded. Some began repeating the same phrase. "It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's beautiful." But it wasn't beauty, it was understanding. That light wasn't the Omnissiah. It wasn't divine. It was a mirror. A signal reflecting our own voices back at us, magnified until it deafened. Every prayer, every binary chant, every declaration of loyalty was being replayed, condensed into one overwhelming note. The forge was hearing itself, and it was horrified. I staggered through the chaos, watching as the world bent inward. The glass pillar from the scar shattered, its fragments floating upward like reversed snowfall. The air rippled, forming shapes, outlines of figures, memories, faces I half recognized. The dead returning, not as bodies, but as data echoes. The field became a graveyard of memory, each fragment flickering through moments long erased. I saw the girl from the forge who had vanished. I saw myself before the implants, young, dirty, alive. And for the first time in centuries, I saw the face of my father. He was smiling. He said nothing, just raised his hand as if to touch me through the shimmer. I stepped forward. The song dimmed. The light collapsed into itself, shrinking into a single burning sphere before disappearing altogether. The air snapped back into silence. The only sound left was the faint ticking of cooling armor and the hollow wind sweeping through the ruins. We were alone again. Of the hundreds who had landed on LSD-9, fewer than 20 stood. The rest were gone, absorbed, erased, or rewritten. My neural core was half fried, my body heavy with exhaustion. And yet, for the first time since the forge remade me, I felt alive. Because in that silence, I could hear something beneath the static. A heartbeat. Mine. I wandered the remains of our war zone in silence. The storm had retreated, and with it the voices. My systems no longer pinged the VoxNet for updates. There were none. There was no command hierarchy left to obey. Trask was gone. The Magos' signal had burned out, a bright flare of madness and data collapsing into null code. What remained of our cohort wandered like sleepwalkers, not retreating, not advancing, just existing. Above us, the sky had cleared. That alone should have terrified me. LSD-9 had no sky, not in any of the planetary archives, no solar cycle, no weather pattern, and yet there it was. Pale cerulean feathered with broken clouds, leaking the kind of sunlight I remembered from Terra's children's books. The light didn't burn, it warmed, and the world smelled of metal and ash and memory. My limbs felt heavier with each step, but not with fatigue. With awareness. The kind the forge had tried to erase. Each footfall reminded me that I was not just steel. I was someone. I had been someone. I found the others in a shallow crater, gathered in a circle around a relic half buried in dirt. A servo skull, long dead. Its eye socket flickered with residual light like it was trying to blink. One of the survivors, a silent vanguard I barely remembered the name of, was whispering into it. Not code, not instruction, a story. He was telling it something about his first battle, about a friend who died next to him, about the taste of burnt rations and the sound of boots on the loading ramp. The skull did not reply. It didn't need to. It was the listening that mattered. We had become ghosts. Not because we had died, but because we had lived too long as echoes of what we were built to forget. The forge had always demanded perfection, but perfection was silence, obedience, an algorithm scrubbed clean of error. That day, surrounded by broken Skitarii and singing metal, I finally saw the error in our design. We were never meant to be silent. We were meant to remember. Even the Emperor in his golden throne had memory etched in his bones. Why else would his dreams still echo through the Astronomicon? I sat beneath a ruined Vox tower and listened to the static. It wasn't random anymore. I could understand it. Not the words, those were long lost, but the rhythm, the cadence. It was like hearing your native tongue after forgetting it for years. It didn't matter what it said. It mattered that it was speaking. I removed my helm for the first time since induction. The air didn't kill me. It tasted like iron and ozone in a forgotten forge humming at the edge of the storm. And for the first time, I spoke without a Vox grill. My voice was cracked, weak, barely human. But it was mine. The others followed. One by one, Skitarii removed their helms. We didn't speak in unison. We didn't chant. We simply talked. Names were exchanged like sacred relics. Memories passed around like Prometheum rations. We laughed. One even cried. Rust ran down his cheek like oil from a cracked seal. We knew this couldn't last. The Imperium would come. The forge would reassert itself. A Magos biologist would dissect us, or a tech priest dominus would purge our logs and recode our minds. There was no place for Skitarii, who dreamed, who whispered memories to broken skulls and tasted ash like it was bread. And still, none of us ran. Because even if they came, they would never take this moment back. Not from me, not from any of us. LSD-9 wasn't cursed, it wasn't haunted, it was true. It was what the Imperium feared most. Not heresy, not chaos. Clarity. Beneath the ruin, beneath the war, beneath the cold data and erased logs, we had found what the forge had tried to kill. Ourselves. As the sun began to set, yes, an actual sun, I sat with my back against the pillar of melted glass and watched the horizon breathe. And I whispered the only thing that still mattered. I was there when the song began, and I remember.